if you are switching from a planner that has pro shaft drives, like a John Deere 1770 NT with XP row units, and you've got row command and pro shaft drives, you're probably used to, when you do any diagnostics on your planner, you're probably used to going back there and turning that handle, and you see seed fall out, and it's a quick diagnostic check to see that nothing is wrong with the meter internally. You turn it, seed comes out, it's probably nothing major wrong with the meter. That's difficult to do. I put precision planning V-sets with AgLeader electric drives on this planner, and that is difficult to do. In fact, it's really hard to turn your meter when you have a planner set up with electric drives, at least from AgLeader. I'm not really sure how it works with precision planting. So one thing I figured out that you can do that really helps, and it's really not that complicated. You do have to remember a couple of things, but what I do is I go to my main menu, I go to settings, I go to configuration settings, and I put in a manual speed. So you can see I've been using 5.3 miles per hour. And then I go into my auxiliary input, which is what controls all these switches, and I hit the assign button, and now you can see that switch 1 controls sections 1 through 6, switch 2 controls sections 7 through 12, switch 3 controls sections 13 through 18, and switch 4 controls sections 19 through 24. And then switch 7 controls section 1 on the liquid, 8 controls section 2 on the liquid, 9 controls section 3 on the liquid, and 10 controls section 4 on the liquid. So let's say that you want to be able to control just row 3 so that you can go back and, for diagnostic purposes, spin that. All I do, you'll notice sections 5 and 6, or switches 5 and 6, I didn't have those assigned to anything. For me, that's a visual separator between seed over here and fertilizer over here. So in my case, what I can do, if I want to go examine row 3, then I would remove the association between switch number 1 and row 3, and then I would go to switch 5, and I would create an association between switch 5 and row 3. So now, whoops, now, messed that up. Now switch 1 has an association with switches 1, 2, or with rows 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Switch 2 is 7 through 12, switch 3 is normal, switch 4 is normal. The switch 5 controls section 3. I click OK, get back out of here. I've already got a manual speed of 5.3 miles per hour. You can see up there, you got a manual speed of 5.3 miles an hour. I can turn all this off except for switch 5. And now, anytime, and I like to turn section control off, I cannot remember if that's required or not. Anyway, anytime I want to go back, well, if I'm in a diagnostic situation, I just program row 5 for whichever row that I want to look at. And now I can go back there underneath my armrest, I've got this deal. And all it is a little piece of wire. And I go back to the planter, and on 2 different rows on the planter, you're probably familiar with it, you have a push button switch on the parallel arm. So I disconnect the weather pack connector, and then on the planter side, like closer to the tractor, the planter side of that weather pack connector, I insert this in on the same 2 pins that are populated on the push button side of that harness. And that jumps the harness, making it think it's in the ground. So I go back there and I stand by row 3, and it just so happens that one of those push button switches is on row 2. So I plug this into row 2, and I turn around and I look at row 3, and I can see whether or not it's turning, and I can see whether or not seed is coming out. And actually, just yesterday, I had a situation where row 3 was turning and seed was not coming out. And I kept prodding around and looking, and I could not figure out what the deal was. Well, finally I figured it out. I had to take the vacuum cover, or the meter cover, off, and I found that if I plug this in while the motor and seed plate and everything were all together as one, the motor would turn, but on the other side the seed plate would not turn. And so there's a pin that had sheared in between the motor and the seed plate. So I replaced that pin and was able to go again. But that kind of stuff is really, really hard to diagnose unless you can figure out how to use a few simple tools. And it only takes just a minute. So I'll demonstrate that one more time. I'm going to turn all this stuff back on. And you have to go back and change all this back before you plant again, just like that. It doesn't take long once you get used to it. Once again, menu, settings, configuration, speed, manual speed, auxiliary input, assign, go to switch, disable that one, go to switch 5, enable that one, get out of there, turn your section control off, turn all these off, turn that on, and now you can see that row 3 is the only one that's on. So when I switch that switch 5 up and down, it turns on, but it's not actually spinning back there because I don't have this jumper switch in. So I can control that from the back easily without walking up to the cab over and over and flipping the switch up and down over and over. It makes it really, really handy to do some diagnostics. Keep hitting the speed input accidentally. And you're all done.